This is the no bullshit guide on how you can ace VCE English. I got a study score of 44, raw 44 out of 50 in year 12, and I'm not saying you can do the same, but if you apply some of the principles that I'm going to tell you in this video and you have enough time from when you're watching this video, I would say a minimum of maybe 8 weeks, you will do significantly well in terms of your results for VCE English. Now, before we begin, let me share my SAC marks with you throughout year 12, as well as what I got in my exam, so you can kind of gauge an idea of what it kind of takes to get like a 44, and then you can kind of adapt it in terms of whatever you're aiming for. I actually wrote these down, so I'm not guessing. There's actually 5 VCE SACs in year 12. Hopefully I haven't forgotten any. The first one was the creative SAC, and I got a 29 out of 30 on that. Then there was the argument analysis. I got 36 out of 40 on that. And then we had the rear window essay, which is your text response. You know, every school will have a different, whatever film or book or whatever you're doing. But for my text response, I got a 26 out of 30, and that was unit 3. In unit 4, we had 2 SACs. No, what? I think we had 2 SACs. So we had the comparative, which is the big SAC. I got 54 out of 60 on that. And then we had the oral presentation, on which I got 39 out of 40. So those were my SAC marks. They were definitely good, but they weren't like top of the school. I wasn't even in like, you know, top 5 ranked at my school. They weren't very high. But on the exam, I got a 9 out of 10 for argument analysis, and I got an 8.5 for both rear window and the comparative, which was my text response and the comparative. Just so now you have a bit of an idea of what it takes in terms of marks to get a 44 in English, and then you can adapt it to whatever, you know, you're aiming for. I would consider myself doing pretty well in the exam because I know how hard it is to get a 9 out of 10 and how infrequently they actually give the 9 out of 10, as well as, you know, the 8-point halves. However, I wasn't some like English genius prodigy. I want to quickly share a story that was 8 weeks prior to my final English exam. At the end of year 12, you have this trial exam that your school runs in order for you to get acclimated to what the VCE actual exam will feel like. So my practice trial English exam was 8 weeks before the actual English exam. And guess what my marks were for my three essays? Oh wait, I got a 9 out of 10 for my argument analysis, which is awesome, hooray. Even though in that exam you get 3 hours, 3 essays, you're supposed to take 60 minutes roughly each essay. I wrote that in like 90 minutes, way over time. And for my other 2 essays, I got a 3.5 and a 0. So what really happened on the day was I started with argument analysis. I did it in 90 minutes. I realized I was behind pace and I just blanked. I froze. I didn't know what to do. I tried to start my second essay. I actually wrote the intro and I tried to start the body paragraph a few times, and then I literally gave up. 2 hours into the essay, all I had done was 1 essay and 1 intro and like half a first body paragraph, and I literally gave up. I froze, and for the next like an hour to like hour 15 minutes, I sat there in my trial English exam, only 8 weeks before my actual English exam, just waiting and looking at other kids. Other kids who were just the same as me, that were frozen and weren't writing on their paper and were just looking around, and I was just making eye contact with them. I remember this one kid, I'm not gonna name him, but me and him made eye contact and we both could tell that we were just like really sad because we didn't know what we were doing. And you could compare that to some other kids, some absolute geniuses. This girl at my school in my year level got a 50, and I remember looking at her in her trial exam 8 weeks before the actual exam, and she was just killing it. She was writing like 8 pages. Like it was just, I looked at her table and it was just like a stack of paper that she had written her essays on, and I was like, well, she has her shit together and I don't. However, that is not what happened in my actual English exam. Things changed. Now, what did I do in those 8 weeks? That's what I want to share with you. Now, in my opinion, there are 2 components to doing well in VCE English. There is a procedural component and there is a declarative component. Now, what the procedural component is the procedure of actually being able to write an essay. The way you formulate sentences, the way you formulate your paragraphs, the way you structure your essay. Whereas the declarative part is knowing your themes, knowing your notes, knowing your analysis, knowing what to write. Procedural is knowing how to write it. Throughout the year, I had a pretty good understanding of the text, so my declarative component was pretty good. Where I struggled was my procedural component, and it was like horrible. I was just slow, and this is the component that like the better you get at the procedural stuff, you're able to do it faster, things make sense, because you can have all the knowledge you want and have a really strong declarative foundation and, you know, look at an essay prompt and know exactly what you want to say and how you want to respond to it, but that may not be able to be conveyed in your essay. That's the procedural component. So in the 8 weeks, I literally focus on the procedural component. In the 8 weeks from the day I flopped my trial exam in English to the day I sat my real English exam, I wrote like an essay a day. An essay every single day. Maybe I wrote roughly 50 essays from the day my trial exam was till my real exam was. And in those 50 essays, this is what happened. I started off really slowly, 10 essays in, I still was writing my essays in maybe, 70, 75 minutes, 20 essays in, 70 minutes, 30 essays in, I was writing them now in 60 minutes. So by 30 essays, I had condensed the time. Procedurally, I had gotten better. And VC English exams are not very scary because the more you write, you start to realize that you end up using the same sort of analysis. You figure out how you write so that you can structure your essays the way you already write. You figure out the flow in which you communicate information and you identify your strengths and you also identify your weaknesses. In that 8 weeks, that procedure component, I did experimental learning cycles. So I would write an essay and then I would get it marked by my teachers. At the time, I paid some tutors to mark my essays for me to get feedback. And what I did, and this is something I got from a JL tutoring video that I'll link in the description below, shout out to Julian if he's watching this video, is at the end of each essay, I wrote down 3 things I would try to do that I didn't do in this essay in the next essay. And that is literally all I did. Every single day I wrote an essay, and I'm telling you, I hated English, but I knew that my procedure component had to be strong. And the way to do that is write. That is the secret sauce to doing well in VCE. Write and write as much as you can, because VCE English is not hard. The texts you are doing are not new, not hard. There is analysis out there. There are study guides out there. That is not what's going to separate you from the competition. Everyone knows the analysis. There are 2 things. Well, either you come up with original analysis, which is awesome. However, even if you have original analysis and you have bad procedural skills to actually convert that and convey that to the examiner, you're not going to do well. However, you can have basic analysis, and most of my analysis, I'll be honest, not a lot of it was new or was novel. Most of it was just stuff that was already there in study guides. Other people already knew that. However, I was able to communicate it better. So if there's 2 people competing, they have the same knowledge, but one is able to communicate it better, the examiner just sees their essay as something far better than the person who has poor procedural skills. So focus on your procedural skills. If you have 8 weeks to your exam, you can definitely change it around. As I said, I got a 0 and a 3 on my practice trial exam because I didn't know how to convey my message. I didn't know how to convey the stuff that I knew. When I was in exam season, I was asking a lot of people that were in the year level above me, which was basically first year uni students because they were year 12s the year before, on how they approach actually managing and taking the declarative knowledge into the exam. A lot of them actually ended up memorizing essays, and I actually started to do that, but then found it wasn't very useful, and I'll tell you why. Great declarative knowledge, your knowledge of the text, quotes, themes, analysis, great procedural knowledge, being able to write it, the flow, the structure, combining them is an essay, and that essay is awesome. You could write that ahead of time, but then you run a risk. If the prompt matches the essay you've memorized, then great, you're gonna do well. If in the instance it doesn't, then you're screwed. And you could have the best essay, but if it doesn't answer the prompt, you're not gonna get anything higher than a 5. So you don't wanna do that. What I did, I made mind maps for each different theme that I could be tested on. And on the mind map, I had, connections and stuff, and I had memorized paragraphs. So I knew for this theme, I had examples going off my mind map, and I had just remembered analysis for all that stuff. If you guys want me to make a video more detailed on how I memorized those analyses and used mind map and relational knowledge to help me construct my essays on the spot and still do well, then I can make another video if that's something interesting, but that's what I did. So what's my final advice? My final advice is to write and practice that procedural component as many times as you can. If you're a year 11 student, if you're even younger in year levels, or if you're watching this video way in the future and you have a lot of time till your exams, get the declarative knowledge as soon as possible. It's not hard. I wouldn't even say you have to spend a lot of time doing it yourself. There are just resources, notes already there. Get the declarative knowledge, and a lot of the times you can practice the procedural component without memorizing the declarative. You can have the declarative and write open book note, like open book essays. For example, you get a prompt, you can know all the knowledge, but you still have to construct it together, and you can time yourself and just practice the procedural component. If you want to get a tutor in VC English, I honestly think it's a waste of your money if you're getting them and all they're doing is teaching you the content, teaching you the text. The school will do that, there's guides. The only instance in which I can see a tutor benefiting you is them being able to give you feedback on your procedural component. But overall, do you need a tutor for VC English? The answer is no. Write your essays, beg your teachers to mark them, they will mark them. And if they don't, beg other students who are like, you know, those English phenoms. And if you're at a school, like, you kind of know that, like, damn, that person's gonna do well in VC English. And a lot of the people that I thought were going to do well in VC English at my school did well. So ask those people to mark your essays, look around, there is plenty of people. You can actually, like, I'm not sure if Julian does it, but you know the guy I told you about, from who I learned the 3 things, improvement each essay? I actually sent my essays and paid him to mark them as well. I'm not sure if he does them anymore, but it's worth, you know, shooting a shot. If you want, like, me to mark them, you know what, actually, nah, I can't be bothered. But yeah, definitely look for people to mark your essays. You probably don't need a tutor, and that's how you do well in VC English. I hope that helped. I'll see you guys next week. No more wasting your time. Go enjoy your lives and make something of yourself.